Alright, so the first thing about making these Whitearmor type beats is it's all about the synth sequences. We're at 145 BPM, and it starts up here with this wavetable. So we're in the key of C# major. You can see we're using some pretty basic voices, but it's creating like a really catchy melody. But we're only using 5 notes out of the scale. Right, so it's more about like that rhythm, and then what we're doing here is we're playing around with autotune on a synth. So I have this like kind of basic synth patch here. It's just a saw wave with unison and then a bit of glide, and it's monophonic. But then we're putting autotune on it. And you can see, yeah, I've got it tuned, but then I've got the formant shifter down a bit. And you can almost hear it like fighting to get out, right? And I think this creates a really cool sound. I heard this in a lot of the Whitearmor tracks that I was studying today, so definitely play around with that auto-tune on synths. I think it's a good way to get those weird textures that you hear a lot. I got a bit of reverb, which is really short. A bit of overdrive, and then a bandpass filter, which also kind of makes it a bit more lo-fi. And then we got this layer. So yeah, this thing's crazy. The way I made this is it's the same wavetable you just saw, but I actually took it and I made it, yeah, and then I reversed it. So if we reverse it back, right, and it's also got like some weird pitching stuff going on. So it's kind of like, it's basically resampling audio into kind of like a new thing, right? And this is a really great way to do it, especially when you already have a cool sequence like this. Just duplicating it and kind of seeing how you can warp that and do weird stuff to it. You know, it creates something really cool for the overall mix. This is just going through a bit of auto-tune itself. Then we have this little guitar. Right, so again, just pretty simple in the C# major, and then going up to that F minor chord. That's what the chord progression is here. One thing I noticed with the Whitearmor tracks is everyone wants to talk about the synths, but there is also this really cool element of like, kind of like these nylon, like classical sort of guitar. I guess this would probably be more of a steel string guitar sound, but if you put that against the synths, it's like that kind of like Celtic organic sort of sound against the synths creates something really cool, right? And also, you know, it's got a little bit of a callback to like old games like RuneScape and Oblivion and all that kind of stuff too, right? Which we're all definitely. As far as MIDI goes here, so again, it's basically kind of like these two formations kind of walking up the chord progression. You'll notice it's pretty much the same voices you saw with that same synth there before. I have this guitar sound inside a cymbal with a little bit of release to make it kind of ring out. I got a short reverb and then just a high pass filter. This one's really more about the sound. You just have to get that proper, that real like plucked RuneScape guitar. You know, with the, it can't just be like a little guitar that doesn't have that much attack. Then we got this little synth bell thing. Now this one's pretty simple musically, but we're kind of playing around with the resolution here too, because it's like starting on G sharp, so we're actually kind of starting on the 5th and then walking down to the root and then doing that major 7th there. So, you know, it creates a bit of uneasiness, especially against the chords. Right, it kind of adds that like melancholic, dreamy sort of stuff, and also it's very spaced out. It doesn't need to have, you know, a note every second. Those ones up top can have that, and this can just be a little more chill. But the sound on this one, it's wavetable, it's a sub oscillator, it's this 8 comb, and then this Galactica. You can see they're all at the same octave, pretty much, except for the sub, and then I've got this pulse width up on the Galactica wavetable. I've got a high pass filter, and then our amp envelope is like just this short pluck to kind of create that bell sort of thing. Here's what the matrix looks like. There's not too much going on. We're just kind of moving like the wavetable position and stuff a little bit. So then it begins the plug-in chain. Now, what's going on here is it starts like this, right? You can really hear the unison that way too, right? But then I've auto-tuned it, right? So you hear it starting to crackle and sound kind of cool. Short reverb, but with a lot of wet, so it becomes kind of more in the background, and it helps differentiate it from like the main stuff too, right? Because it is more in the background. And then this is something I heard is this grain delay. I know he's using grain delay a lot on these, right? And you can hear it's just creating that weird sort of ambient field almost with that. And then I have a bit of saturation, so without it, with it. And that's another thing at the end of these like reverby delay kind of chains, you know, almost adding like a bit of that shoegaze thing of like kind of crunching up the reverb and delay. Then we've got this other little stab bell thing, which is ironically playing some of the same notes that one was playing. But again, they're all just kind of adding up to create, you know, this big bed of like musical stuff. Now the way this one's made is it's operator, it's just one oscillator white noise with a bit of attack like that, and then a bandpass filter with a very high resonance. And then what you gotta do is click on this, play by key, and then it's gonna key track it, so every note you play, the filter will be at the right pitch. And you create this cool kind of thing. It comes out sounding just like this. And then I'm using Roar. I just literally just got this and just brought the amount up. That's all it is. But it brings out that resonance. And you get this cool, uneasy synth. A bit of very short reverb. I also noticed too, like he uses a bit of these sounds. And usually the reverb isn't super long on these kinds of things. It kind of works with that texture that you're already getting from the filter. And then I have a high pass filter because this definitely has a lot of like lows and low mids. So then we got this lead, you know, I was trying to show you how to do that. You definitely hear these in a lot of these tracks. So as far as the lead goes, what we're doing here is we're basically playing around with this basic, like it's literally almost like hot cross buns, like. There we go. Like it's that same kind of concept, honestly. And what's interesting about this one too is, like I said, we're C sharp major here, but we're actually kind of hitting onto that major seventh there. So you're kind of getting again like more of that uneasy major seven sort of feel. Like it's even just how that's gonna interact with those chords. The other thing you'll notice with this is that the pattern, there's some of these notes glide, and the glides always get really short. That's how you get that sound, is it needs to go and then stop. If it holds out, it's not the same thing. See what I'm saying? So yeah, it's like the little details there. And then also notice this ends the first time and then the second time, right? So it's that resolution too, and the call and response there. The other thing is, I think this kind of lead, you know, it really plays off of the drums. Right, like it's all about how that's all kind of grooving together. I think like a lot of people don't talk about that enough with this like Whitearmor, Drain Gang kind of sound. Is like there's a lot of groove happening between those trap patterns, which do really make your body move, and then these synths, which like have a lot of grooves. Right, like there's a lot of movement happening there, and I think that's a lot of what makes this music really move people. Now, as far as the actual sound goes, this is made with Wavetable. It's another autotune synth, so we're starting with this. It's just a sine wave with a little bit of this warp brought up on the Wavetable thing. I've got a low pass filter a little bit, no unison, and also the mono and the glide is very important, right, for those little glide notes. Autotune, which doesn't do the most on this one, but it does still give it some weirdness. And you could play, yeah, you can play with that format and get a lot of stuff. And then just a short reverb. I've got this bell. Right, so we're going major third, root note, major seventh there. Again, just another one of those like chill bell elements that just adds a lot to the overall musicality. It's a bell sample, right? And then I'm grain delaying it. Again, more of that kind of stuff that I heard in a lot of these tracks. Just using the grain delay to get these kind of weird, sort of unreal, kind of chorused out delays, right? And then we got one more synth. We have this one. So we're literally just going root 7 5. Right? It's just a really simple, repetitive melody, but it's like you have all those other ones, and they're kind of like tight, and then this just brings it all home. And kind of keeps it going with something really steady too. It's another thing I noticed is like they'll have the chords moving, and then they'll just have a synth like this. It's just that same thing over and over, and that's another one that really plays with the drums too. Right, it's like all of these things are working together in these beats. Now, for this sound, it's made with wavetable. It starts like this. So it's basically this weird pluck I made where usually if you're making a pluck, right, you'd put the filter down there, but I just kept it up higher. But there's still like the envelope on that, so you kind of get like that first note has the attack. And then all the glide notes sound really cool and smooth, right? So you can see the envelope on the filter frequency. Got our glide, got the unison on phase sync. Then we got a bit of redux. Yeah, I've heard this a lot, like the Bit Crush Transplex. And really, I think what Whitearmor's using is this old Nexus preset. I'm pretty sure it was literally the one that you would get when you would like open Nexus up, where it's just like these really dreamy, kind of weird, almost 303, almost transpluck kind of. I've heard that in a lot of the beats, and I was basically just trying to recreate that preset here because I know it's that one. A little bit of delay, a little bit of reverb. And there we go. So that's all the synths, and then we can move down to our drums. So starting here, like just with the main drums, really, it's like, you know, we just got our... So the thing I've noticed with Whitearmor is it is a lot of, you know, kind of similar trap patterns and similar trap drums to what you hear, but then he'll do like a little thing like, you know, usually the trap pattern would just be like this, right? It'd be like, or maybe even like this, you know, nowadays. Right? But instead, it's like, oh, well, what would happen if we just had one kick and then you don't hear the next kicks until just the end of the next bar? You know, and it's like little stuff like that, and that's just one example of it. I mean, you can do so much with this. Really, I think the bottom line is like just being less fear, you know, have less fear of like playing around with these patterns here, because you can do a lot inside of this kind of trap formula. It's basically like get the hi-hat and snare with like not the most hi-hat rolls, but also not just boring 8th note 2-step stuff. You also notice like low pass the hi-hat a little bit too. I think he does this, like sometimes just making the drums a little bit darker can help. Plus our rim shot, same deal. You can see I pitched that and I low passed it, but you have those, and then you can play around with like a cool kick pattern. Right, and then we get this other rim shot which jumps in. I've noticed that also with the Whitearmor beats, you know, being fearless with kind of like just playing with having different percussions, create different rhythms inside of there. And then also the 808. And that's another one too, like same deal, just keeping it really sparse and like letting the notes ring out. I've noticed a lot of like those Whitearmor beats that people really, really like. They've got an 808 that's honestly kind of short like this, and it just hits. You know, that space is very important because you got these synths up here just doing the absolute most, going crazy the whole time. And so the drums can just be a little bit more open. And it's all gonna groove. Now, we've also got a bit of saturation on the drums. I think that's another important thing I noticed too. If I turn this off, yes, it is much quieter, and we can turn it up and get the same level, but there's a certain glue and a certain just sound from having these all being saturated together, which I've heard a lot in Whitearmor's music. And I know he uses Ableton, so there's a good chance he's just literally using this saturator for it. I mean, it sounds very similar. And that's also where the low passing on the hi-hat and the snare come in too, because like if I turn those off and then you start saturating it, see, like that rim shot kind of stands out in a nasty way, but then you just cut a little bit of highs off, and then it's all gonna sit really well. So that's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Let me know if you want to see more of these kind of videos in the comments. You can grab this template at the top of the description on my website. Thanks for the support, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.